All right. Again, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining NCDEQ for our Volkswagen Settlement Level 2 Workplace Program webinar. I am Stephen Rice, an environmental specialist for the Division of Air Quality and the Level 2 Program Manager, and I am joined by additional DEQ staff who manage other aspects of the Volkswagen Settlement. I have a few housekeeping rules before we get started. All attendees will be muted during today's webinar. Questions can be submitted in the Q&A box and will be addressed during the question and answer time if not covered in today's presentation. The raise hand feature will be disabled until the question and answer time comes and will only be considered for those who have called into the webinar by phone. For those that are calling in, pressing *3 will raise your hand and pressing *3 again will lower your hand. All other attendees must use the Q&A box to submit questions and to submit questions. And please send questions to the general Q&A and not directly to specific panelists. Also, the webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the DEQ Volkswagen website at a later date, along with a copy of the slides. Finally, we have 2 hours scheduled to discuss the program and the application process, but if we complete everything and answer all questions with time to spare, we will have the option to adjourn early. If we are not able to answer all questions by the end of our time, we will let you know how to get your questions to us. When today's presentation becomes available on the DEQ Level 2 website, please be aware that links found in the slides will only be active when used in presentation mode. So today's webinar will cover an overview of the Level 2 Workplace Program and its application process, information on when and how to submit your application, information on what happens to your application once it is submitted, information on where to find answers after today's webinar, and a time for question and answers. I would like to remind all of our attendees today that this is not a public forum for comments on the implementation of the Volkswagen settlement. So the RFP of the Level 2 Workplace Program was released on June 13th. The Level 2 Program overview found in the RFP states that NCDEQ is allocating the full 15% allowed in the VW State Trust Agreement for Zero Emission Vehicle or ZEV infrastructure projects outlined in the NC Mitigation Plan. North Carolina DEQ will give 70% of the Phase 2 ZEV infrastructure allocation to DC fast charging infrastructure projects and 30% to Level 2 charging infrastructure projects. This program has just a little less than $500,000 available for the funding of new Level 2 charging stations at workplaces. The primary goal is to increase use of ZEVs in place of gas-powered cars in order to mitigate nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, and greenhouse gas emissions within the state. To achieve that goal, the program will emphasize adding new ZEV charging infrastructure in underserved areas, extending the existing light-duty ZEV infrastructure across the state, encouraging intrastate and interstate ZEV vehicle usage at North Carolina's diverse geographic, historic, and tourist attractions, as well as highlight the environmental benefits of ZEVs. The application for the workplace program will be available in the Grant Management System, otherwise known as the GMS, on July 25th, and applications will be accepted and approved on a first-come, first-served basis until funds are exhausted. The workplace program will assist interested parties in applying for funds to install light-duty ZEV Level 2 charging infrastructure as described in the North Carolina Volkswagen Mitigation Plan. In Phase 1, workplaces were acceptable project types but did not have their own dedicated program. In Phase 2, DEQ is happy to provide workplaces with their own Volkswagen funding source after getting feedback on how desirable workplace charging is to current and prospective employees and how businesses want to transition to EV fleets. Throughout today, I will discuss the changes made from Phase 1 for this program, but something that hasn't changed that I want to mention right off the bat is that this is a reimbursement program. This means that applicants will be willing and able to purchase and install level 2 charging equipment using their own funds. Also, just like in phase 1, applicants are limited to $25,000 in approved rebate vouchers at any time. Something new in phase 2 is that rebate vouchers for awarded projects will expire after 1 year from the date of an agreement being fully executed. In phase 1, the pandemic and supply chain issues made the original plans in the time frame of 180 days pretty much impossible for most awardees. And with that information, we decided to learn from experience and double the time to a full year of rebate eligibility in phase 2. Here on the slide, we can see all the available funding for ZEV programs in phase 2. The Workplace program is the fourth and final level 2 program to have its RFP released. And again, we can see that there is almost $500,000 devoted to rebate for this particular type of project. In short, eligible applicants for this program include local, county, municipal, federal, or tribal government agencies, incorporated nonprofits, and businesses. Specific details on applicant eligibility are found in the Level 2 Workplace RFP. The RFP states that workplaces that have at least 5 or more year-round and full-time employees on site are eligible project locations. Ineligible project locations are locations on residential property, locations for publicly accessible charging, and locations found for state agencies. This program offers a single level of project reimbursement since all projects should be designed to be not publicly accessible. This means that all workplace projects can be reimbursed at $3,000 per port or up to 60% of total project costs, whichever of these is less. So for example, let's say you wanted to apply for a project which consisted of installing 4 level 2 charging ports. If all the quotes for this project totaled $22,000, then the two calculated rebate options would be $12,000 or $13,200. Since the program uses the lesser of these two calculated amounts, the maximum rebate offered for this project would be the $12,000. Like all Volkswagen programs, there are a number of project and site requirements that should be considered before you apply for funding. For example, each Level 2 workplace project must have a minimum of 2 ports. Each installed Level 2 charging station must connect to a network by wired Ethernet, Wi-Fi, or cellular connection, and each charger must be maintained and operated for a minimum of 5 years from the date of project completion. The full list of project requirements for this program is found in the RFP. Site requirements for this program include the EV charging station must be located in a parking space not reserved for a particular employee. In your application, proof that all employees are permitted to use the EV charging station must be included. If the property or site owner is not the applicant, the rebate applicant must provide a signed letter from the landowner indicating approval of the project. And for each port installed, 1 parking space must be designated for plug-in electric vehicle use only and marked clearly through permanent visible signage. The full list of site requirements is outlined in the RFP. A new aspect of Phase 2 programs is a focus on charger accessibility. This is outlined in the site requirements of the RFP and helps ensure that projects make every effort to be ADA compliant and follow all applicable laws, ordinances, regulations, and standards. Additional reference material regarding accessibility for public charging stations can be found on the Plugin NC webpage, which is linked in this slide and is also found in the RFP. The Volkswagen State Mitigation Trust Agreement states that trust funds may be used on costs necessary for and directly connected to the acquisition, installation, and operation and maintenance of new light-duty ZEV supply equipment. The following items on this slide are all considered eligible expenditures, and this list, plus a list of ineligible expenditures, are both found in the workplace RFP. So now that we've covered the background information and requirements of the workplace program, let's transition into the process of submitting an application. Thankfully, not much has changed here either between phase 1 and phase 2, but we'll still cover the process from beginning to end, starting with the fact that NCDEQ will still only accept applications submitted through the NCDAQ grant management system. Prior to using the GMS, applicants must obtain an NCID and then complete and submit the online external request application. This request application is an updated version of the GMS Access Authorization Form, which was used in phase 1, and makes the process of gaining access to the GMS easier than before. When you complete the request application, you should also complete and email the State of North Carolina Substitute W-9 form to the email address you see on this slide. So to request access to the DAQ Grants Management System, as I said before, you will first need an NCID. In this slide, I've provided links for NCID registration, as well as the How to Create an NCID guide. And I'll walk through the steps of creating an NCID in just a moment. We did first want to point out acceptable NCID formats. NCIDs must use the following format, or your request for access to the GMS will be denied. We expect to see an NCID with your first name or initial, followed by your middle initial, which is optional, but then we would need your last name, and you can tail off the NCID with a number if the particular NCID you have entered is already in use. We can see some examples for someone named Wiley Coyote. These are a couple options that they could use for their NCID. Again, the combination of first name, middle initial, and last name, and then also one option where a number is at the end in the event that the NCID that was entered was already taken by somebody else. This is all to kind of stress that NCIDs must not be a company or organization name. NCIDs are supposed to be unique account usernames for a specific individual. So we would need you to follow this format so that the NCID that you create is specifically linked to your NCID account. Here we have some important NCID information. If you already have an individual or government NCID, there is no need to create a new NCID. If you have any other EBS or SAP system account, you will still need an NCID. There is space on the Access application for you to put your current account information. Also, once you have completed an NCID request, you will receive a new NCID user registration email from ncid.notifications@nc.gov. In that email, you must click the link and follow the instructions to formally complete the registration of your NCID before submitting the external request application. So to begin the process of creating an NCID for Grants Management System access, you need to go to ncid.nc.gov and click the register link, and that link is highlighted in this slide. After clicking that link, you'll be taken to the new user registration page where you'll click the individual NCID option. Now you'll enter in information into the following text fields. When the required information is all entered, click the Continue button. So just a reminder for when you are selecting your NCID, we talked about the format that you must follow. Again, a combination of first name, middle initial, and last name with a number at the end if necessary. Again, do not use a company or organization name as your NCID. If we see that is the case on your request application, that application will be returned and you will need to create a new NCID. So after you entered the information and clicked the Continue button, the system needs to verify the information that you just entered. A code was sent to the email address that you provided, which you'll need to enter here. And here is an example of the verification email, which contains that 6-digit code. You'll take that code and enter it into the field from the previous slide. And after entering the code and clicking Check Code, you'll receive a confirmation that your information has been verified. Click the Continue button to see the remaining setup steps. At this stage, you'll need to create security questions and answers to activate your NCID account. Click the Continue button to complete this step. You can see that there are 5 security questions that you'll need to configure for your account. Once the questions are selected and the answers are provided, click Save Answers. And just like that, this completes the NCID creation process. If you experience issues with your NCID or your NCID password, you'll need to go back to the ncid.nc.gov webpage to retrieve your username, to retrieve your password, or to unlock your account. On that page, there is a Need Help link for other NCID problems or questions as well. So just a kind of a public service announcement. You must read and follow all the directions on the next slides to request access to the grants management system and to be approved so that you're able to log into the system. Our definition of approved means that you received a Welcome to the DAQ Enterprise Business System portal email. And as you are thinking about creating your NCID and getting access to the GMS, please know that DAQ cannot guarantee GMS access for the workplace application if a request is submitted after July 11th. So please do this, follow these steps as soon as you can. In a previous slide, I had mentioned that the EBS external request application is an updated version of the GMS access authorization form that was used in phase 1. When you complete the request application, you should also complete and email the State of North Carolina Substitute W-9 form to daq.nc_VWgrants@ncdenr.gov. Please note that just like in phase 1, an organization can have up to 3 authorized users in the GMS at any given time, and that once the authorization is processed, you will receive an email from NCDOT IT SAP Support Services. Once all required forms are received to process your GMS access request, it could take a week or longer to complete. Please do not wait until the last week before the application opens to request GMS access. At that point, DAQ cannot guarantee that you'll have access when the application opens. Now, I do not believe you will need access as soon as the application opens, but there have been applicants that have a desire to apply as soon as possible, seeing that this is a first-come, first-served program. So just depending on what your specific needs for your application are, please get us your information as soon as you can. All right, here on this slide, we see part of the State of North Carolina Substitute W-9 form. This form allows DAQ to set up an organization with new GMS users in the North Carolina accounting system in order to receive reimbursement payments. For all new GMS users, we encourage you to submit the EBS application and the W-9 form as soon as possible. And we also encourage you to fill in all documentation electronically versus by hand. All right, third-party access authorization forms. In cases where an applicant has a third party submitting applications on their behalf, the following procedures must be followed. The applicant must provide in writing that they are authorizing this third party to submit applications and other information on their behalf, and the third party will need to obtain their own NCID and submit an access authorization request application with the applicant's organization address and information and the third party's phone number and email address. Enter third-party contractor in the comments field of the request application. And the letter or the email that is required for a third party to submit this information should be sent along with the organization's W-9 form. Again, that is to both forms would be sent to daq.nc_vwgrants@ncdenr.gov. So at this point, you might be feeling a bit overwhelmed with all of the procedure and all the information needed just to apply, especially if this is the first program that you're applying for. You are definitely not the only one feeling this way. To help make sure that all application requirements are being met, we have created an application checklist, which covers general requirements plus requirements specifically for the Level 2 workplace program. The link to this checklist is found in this slide and also on the DAQ Workplace website. All documentation must be included when submitting an application for that application to be reviewed. Please note that a unique requirement for the workplace program is the inclusion of the workplace verification form. That is documentation that needs to be attached to your application. And now that we've come, now we've come to the grant management system overview and demonstration, where I will tell you how to use the GMS, the various tutorials found in the GMS, and how to submit an application. This slide has links to the GMS portal, GMS user guides, and a sample application found on the Workplace Program webpage. Our test system, unfortunately, is no longer accessible, but I'm going to log in to the production GMS and walk through the steps of submitting an application up to the point where you would actually submit your application. So here we had seen before the home screen for the grants management system. To log into the system, you're going to use your NCID and password. Once you have that information entered, we'll click log in. Now that you're in the system, you will see a variety of panels on your home page, including portals for frequently asked questions and tutorials. To get to the application, though, we're going to click the Division of Air Quality Grants panel. A new browser window has opened and will show you your account homepage. It's full screen. The layout of this account is a bit different. This is my personal account. Yours will look a little bit different, but ultimately there is a number of search options where you will have the ability to create a new application, to edit that application, and a variety of other options. Let's go through the process of applying for a Level 2 workplace rebate by clicking the Create New Application link found here. So by clicking the search button, we now see that this account is set to reference all of NCDEQ's grants. We won't see the Level 2 application for the workplace program until the application goes live on July 25th. But the workplace application is a clone of the public access program application. So for this demonstration, I will use that link. But please make sure that when you are applying for a workplace rebate, that you click the link for the workplace program application. So again, I will click the public access program, but in your case, when you're applying for the workplace program, you should see the link for the workplace program and you should click the link for the workplace program. And my account, since I am a reviewer, isn't set to a business partner or organization. So just for this demonstration, I will enter one quickly. So today I will be the town of Cary. And again, now that I've selected my business partner, that's something that should happen for you automatically as you are as your information is entered into the grants management system before the application goes live. We're looking at the first page, or you can say the first tab of the application. In this first project tab, I'm going to enter my project's basic information, starting with the project title. And then right below, you can see that there are drop-down fields for specifying aspects of a project. I'm going to select the appropriate project details and then move on to entering the project location information. So for program type, there's only this one option. We don't have the option to change that. But for equipment type, we will see the level 2 charging workplace. You must click this option when applying for a workplace project, the level 2 charging workplace. In this case, being the town of Cary, I will select government and project type. We saw the slide before with our funding level, and the expectation is that workplace projects are not publicly accessible, so I will click the not publicly accessible option. Now I will enter in my program location information. I'm just going to enter in something fast. Six. And then again, available for 12 hours or longer. You can select yes or no, depending on the orientation in the area where your chargers are. Let's say in this case, I cannot guarantee that they will be available for 12 hours or longer. I will select no. So now that I have all of this information entered, I have the options here to check the information that was entered, to continue on to the next tab of the application, or to save and close my application. So let's click check. I see that on this page no errors were found, which is encouraging. I will click OK, and now I know I can progress forward with accurate information and all the information entered into the required fields. So let's continue on to the next tab. So this tab, this contact tab, is where I will enter the contact information for the project's authorized representative, the project manager, and the financial contact. While it's possible that one person can fill all three of these roles in this sample application, you know what, I will go ahead and show the copy function. So we'll say that one person is going to fill all of these roles. First name, last name, And then again, if you have separate people filling these roles, you would enter in that information separately, but just for ease, you can copy the information from the individual above all the way down to financial contact if these roles are going to be filled by the same person. Again, we can click check if we want. No errors are found. And then we can click next to go to our next tab. So in the charger detail tab, I'm going to enter the requested information for any chargers being installed at the project location. So again, the full list of requirements for a qualifying level 2 project are found in the RFP, but for this tab, please remember that a project in total requires a minimum of 2 ports and at least 1 designated and clearly marked EV parking space per port. Also, each charger must provide at least 6.6 kilowatts of charging power and have a minimum of a 5-year warranty for equipment and service. Now that I'm ready to enter my chargers, I'm going to click the Add Charger button and begin filling in the fields. For multiple chargers, click that Add Charger button as many times as necessary. So let's say for this project, I have 2 dual point chargers. I will make up some information here. Model. If these were dual port chargers, the number of ports for this one particular charger would be 2. I'm devoting 2 parking spaces. Let's say I know that they provide 7.7 kilowatt charging power, and then I need to indicate the warranty period. And again, the warranty period must be 5 years for each charger. So let's do the same thing here. And again, if they were more than 2 specific chargers for your particular program, you can click this Add Charger button as many times as necessary. Again, if I click check, it says no errors are found, so we'll move on to the next slide. Right, for the funding tab, I'm going to need to complete a rebate calculation spreadsheet and then enter the total from that spreadsheet into the calculated rebate amount total here. The link to the spreadsheet is found on this tab and also on the Volkswagen Workplace webpage. We'll click this link. Let's see if we have the updated link. Perfect. All right. So now we are looking at the rebate calculator. First thing to notice, this calculator file applies to all of the level 2 programs, and because of that, we have 3 different tabs for the various programs. We didn't have a rebate calculator for the state agencies, but for the 3 programs that required it, the public access, the MUD, and the workplace, they are found here. All of these worksheets are slightly different. So when you open this file, make sure that you click the Workplace tab so that you're filling in the proper calculation worksheet. And what we'll do now, first, is read the worksheet instructions. And they say to fill in the blue spaces with your project information and check the box that corresponds to your project category. The potential rebate amounts will automatically calculate. And upon completion of this worksheet, you will save the file and upload it as an attachment with your application in the DAQ grant management system. So here, organization was Carrie, and then the project title was chargers. Insert the total number of charging ports to be installed from our charger detail tab on the application. There was a sum of 4 ports, so 4 will be entered there. And again, I had mentioned before, let's say through all of my quotes, I received the total cost for this project would be $22,000. I'll enter that there. Right below, it says insert the total of other rebates, incentives, or subsidies that will be used incorporated into this project. Let's say in this case, I did not have any. I will leave that blank, but if you had other funding sources that you were using for your project, you would enter those in here. And now we see that the net total, or the net project cost, is the $22,000. Below here, we have the no public access option automatically selected, the $3,000 per port amount, or the 60% of total project cost. We see that the calculated amounts are $12,000 or $13,200. And as I said before, the rebate amount is the lower of the 2 calculations, and with a maximum amount of $25,000. So we can see here that the calculated rebate amount that I would need to enter on the funding tab is $12,000. The last thing I'll point out about this worksheet is if you have multiple workplaces that you're incorporating into a singular application, and these workplaces or these locations of your fleets are in different areas, they have different addresses, you would need to list those addresses here. If you have one single location, you don't need to. Some people, just for completeness, like to add it here, but that information would be entered directly on the first tab of your application. But if there are multiple addresses, the fact that the application only registers a single address means that you would need to enter all of the addresses for your application in this section of the rebate calculator. Again, with everything filled out, you would save this as a Excel file on your local computer, and you would use that file later as an attachment for your application. For now, I'll just shrink that down. And again, the calculator said 12,000, so 12,000 is the amount that I'm going to enter here. Please make sure that you enter the calculated amount and not the amount based on the quotes that you have received. The number in the calculator and the number entered here must be the same. Now that that is done, I'm going to go to the next tab, which is your project details tab. In this tab, I'm instructed to describe the project procurement, installation, activation, and commissioning, testing, and signage associated with this project. I should note any collaborations with utilities, local businesses, cities, counties, or other entities, and describe the sustainable business model for the project, the customer support, service accessibility, and networking and security incorporated into the project. Again, we need a good amount of description here. Please provide as much information as you can. And note that there is a 3,000 character limit. If for any reason your description would go over 3,000, you're welcome to save the project details in a Word file and attach that file to the application. Again, just for right now, you would need to enter more than test, but just for simplicity's sake, I'll enter test. Again, please include as much information here as possible. All right, and now we have made it to the final tab of the application. Here is where the authorized representative will certify that all proposed activities will be carried out, that all money received will be utilized solely for the purposes for which it is intended, that records documenting the planning process and implementation will be maintained and submitted when requested, and that DEQ is granted access to inspect the project sites or the records associated with this project. At this point, I can still save and close before submitting. And actually for this demo, because I don't want to submit an application, being that this is just a demonstration, we will continue the next step of the demo as if I have clicked save and close. If I had clicked save and close, the application would generate an application number, which can be used to reference and to ultimately go back and complete and submit the application. On the page that application ID number is generated, you will also see an opportunity to upload attachments to your application. The tutorial that we're about to go into will have a screenshot of what this page looks like. But again, at this certification tab, you have the option to save and come back to the application or to submit the application. So in order for an application to be considered for funding, you must click the submit button. Otherwise, it will never end up in my workflow for review. So definitely make sure that when you are comfortable that the application is complete, you are going back to click the submit button. Okay, so in the event that I had saved and closed and needed to come back to an application, what I will do is show you on my home page. Again, down here we have a link to the DHU training library. If I click this link specifically, it's going to take me to an internal training library. But in a case for potential applicants, on your account, you will see a link to the external training library. And I have that link found here. You see here on the left, there are a variety of tutorials for a variety of topics that you will experience while using the grants management system. Once you have access to the GMS, before even the application for the workplace program goes live, we recommend that you explore these tutorials and get as comfortable as you can with using the grants management system. I had mentioned through the application process, we got to a point where I had clicked save and close. And at that point, if we were to come back and finish the application or make edits to the application, on that home page, again, I go here, we have an edit application form link. So you would have to click that link, and we're going to watch the tutorial of what that would look like. And again, this tutorial would be available to you to reference whenever you want. Here we see the step-by-step list of how to edit your application, and we have this play button, which will show you a video demonstration. So let's go ahead and watch the video. Again, this is just a simulation that will guide us through the steps of editing a previously saved application. We see that edit application form here, which we will click. Pause it for just 1 second. So again, once you save an application, the system generates and assigns an application ID for that specific application. So you'll watch the video here, enter in that application ID, and then click search. Similar to referencing the workplace application, if you were to click search without any information entered in these fields, that should also be able to reference the application that you have saved. So either way would be fine. Again, one way or another, we would suggest saving a copy of that application ID once it's generated to have on hand. You will need that going forward, but to edit the application, you can either enter it manually and search for it specifically, or click that search button. Either way should bring up your application. We see that it's being entered, and after we click search, the link for your application comes up, and you will click that link. It says now you can make any necessary changes to your application. You can change any of the information that was entered into any of the tabs. And if you are still not ready to submit, you can click Save and Close. That will save the changes made to your application. And again, you can see here, this is the confirmation page where the application ID is generated. The application ID is hidden behind this little congratulations window here. And then down below, you will see the location to browse for files and to upload attachments to your application. So again, when you are applying, have your checklist on hand so that you can upload all of the requirement attachments. Again, it says congratulations. You can edit the previously saved application. Again, you can go back and edit this if you're not done. And again, if I go back one step, if we were ready to submit the application, the tab is kind of hidden up here as we've gone lower in the window, but you would go to that certification tab and click submit. After you have saved an application, the only way you can click that submit button is using the edit application form link that we're looking at now. So whether you're updating information or whether you are getting ready to submit that application, either option must be done through the edit application form link. And those were the steps to edit your application. Again, that's also how you would get to the option to submit a saved application. Again, that tutorial and other tutorials are found on your GMS homepage. Definitely play around with those, get as familiar as possible. The link to the manual, if you prefer reading through a document, the link for that manual was found in the presentation slides, and those also have step-by-step guides of using various aspects of the grant management system. Okay, so what we are looking at now, something I wanted to make sure that we talked about after the event of submitting an application, is the potential for an application to be returned to an applicant. What you see in the slide is an example of a return letter that was used in phase 1. If your application was found to be complete or needs edits after being reviewed, you will receive an email from the grants management system with a return letter attached, similar to the one you're looking at now, but outlining the specific work that needs to be done to your application. And as we had just seen before, in order to make those edits to your application, you would log into the grants management system and use the edit application form process that we just explored. Again, I mentioned the GMS user manual. There was a link previously, but this slide is devoted just to accessing that manual. It covers all aspects of the grants management system in really great detail. So if you have a question on how to do something within the GMS, of course, you're welcome to email me or other program managers, but you also have here the link to the manual. Some tips and some things to know. Again, we encourage you not to wait until the week of July 18th to request GMS access. We will be unable to guarantee access come the July 25th application opening. So really, we need more than a week's time to get people into the system. Please get that information, those forms to us as soon as possible. In your application, budget information should be as accurate as possible. DEQ reserves the right to partially fund awarded projects. We will not accept paper, scanned, emailed, or faxed applications. All applications must be done through the grants management system. Do not sign any agreements with vendors or start any work until your agreement is fully executed with North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. So not only are projects required to be from scratch, you cannot apply to be awarded for a charger that you had previously installed. You cannot start any work on a project until you have a fully executed agreement in hand. And again, an application award is not a fully executed agreement. That is something that will be sent to you after being signed by NCDEQ. Just like in phase 1, there will be quarterly, annual, and final project reporting requirements for all awarded projects. The templates for these reports are found on the forms page of the DEQ Volkswagen website. DEQ staff will perform site visits at all stations to verify installation and operation of the charging stations before approval of any reimbursement claims. And DEQ staff must be granted access to the charging sites. So in closing, the Level 2 Workplace Request for Proposal was released on June 13th and is available on the Workplace Program webpage. The application for this program opens July 25th, and applications are accepted and approved on a first-come, first-served basis until funds have been exhausted. Again, this is a reimbursement program, as are all Volkswagen programs. Please note that after July 25th, DEQ will review the applications on a week-to-week basis. And in phase 1, we announced awarded projects in large groups. If there are any changes to this schedule or to this process, we'll provide information on the Level 2 website. Oh, and there is a slide with the timeline, again, the release of the RFP, all the way to the rebate recipients being announced. And then speaking of the Level 2 website, here is a direct link. The website has the RFP and provides access to all the information that we covered today. If you have any questions going forward, you can search the website. You can contact me directly, or you can send an email to the NCVW Grants email account. If you're not currently on our mailing list and would like to receive email updates about the Volkswagen program, please send an email with the word subscribe in the subject line to that NC_VW Grants email account. There are several resources and partners that worked with both DEQ and applicants in phase 1 that you are encouraged to utilize in phase 2. Contact information for this list is available on the Workplace program. There are certain questions that maybe DEQ is not able to answer when it comes to specific vendors or specific models. We can talk about eligibility, but we cannot give recommendations. The list here are able to provide the information that we can't, as they have been closely related with the Level 2 projects in phase 1. Here are your Volkswagen program contacts. Again, I'm Stephen Rice, the Level 2 program manager. There's Brian Phillips, our Mobile Sources Compliance Branch Supervisor, and Robin Barros, the Allied Program Supervisor, who helps us with Volkswagen outreach. And that concludes the informational part of today's webinar. Now we will address the questions that have been collected in the Q&A box. Our host will now attempt to enable the raise hand feature for those who have called into the webinar by phone. Again, pressing *3 will raise your hand, and then pressing *3 again will lower your hand. All other attendees must use that Q&A box to submit their questions. And I would like to remind attendees that this is not an opportunity to comment on the implementation of the Volkswagen settlement, and questions that you submit will need to pertain to the Level 2 Workplace program. So Volkswagen staff, if there are questions, I'm ready to answer them.
Hi, Stephen. Yes, we do have several questions in the Q&A. The first one comes from Melissa, and it's a question followed by some explanation to their situation. She asks, can you say more about ineligible sites being places that are publicly accessible? The situation we're looking at is a charging station in a parking lot that serves a small grocery store. Grocery store staff park their vehicles in that parking lot. Naturally, shoppers park their vehicles in that same lot.
Sure. As we were finalizing the RFP for this program, we came to an agreement and an understanding that certain aspects of the workplace program should be unique, especially when looking at the public access program. The workplace chargers are designed, the intent is specifically to be used by employees of the organization applying or for fleet vehicles of that organization. So based on the description of the project you have in mind, where a combination of employees and people from the public would all have equal access to those chargers. If the idea of your project is for them to be publicly accessible, that project might be more appropriate for the Level 2 public access program. There are still funds available for that program. It was the first come, first serve program released, so we already have awarded some applicants with rebates. They haven't been fully executed yet, but we have started delegating funds toward people in that program. So what I would say is, if you have a desire for your chargers to be publicly accessible, please consider the public access program. If you are comfortable with just employees of that organization or just the fleet vehicles of that organization having access, then that is where you would apply for the workplace program.
Okay. Our next question comes from Jillian. They would like to know, how long should we expect before we are granted access to the grants management system?
Okay, hi Jillian. Assuming that when you provide us the forms, after you've created your NCID and you give us the W-9 form and you complete the online access request form, if everything that you provide is complete and accurate and we don't have any questions or concerns, the next step is that we pass that on to the SAP team to review and to get you into the GMS. So there is a review period of time on our end. There's a review period of time from the SAP team. Initially, earlier in phase 2, this would take about a week total from an applicant, a potential applicant, giving us the information and then getting access. Now, I believe it's closer to a 2-week minimum, and depending on other programs and people trying to get access for those other programs, and also personnel. This is the summer and people are going on vacation. This could increase the amount of time it takes to process that information. So again, I think it's safe to say about a 2-week minimum, and maybe be prepared for it to be longer. So that's why we really encourage everyone, if you know you're interested, even right after today's webinar, maybe start the process of getting an NCID and the materials ready for your online access request form.
Our next question comes from Christine. Christine would like to know, if a workplace receives approval of the funds, what is the timeline for procuring and installing the EVSEs? Do they have to have a quote prior to submitting an application?
Hi, Christine. Yeah, we talked about how quotes were required. Well, maybe if I didn't mention it specifically, my apologies, but in the checklist, we had the slide devoted to the checklist. It does say there that quotes and an itemized budget are both attachments that we expect to see with an application. You will need to have the financial aspect on hand before you apply and before you're awarded. When it comes to a time frame, the ability to start a project, that seems like it's a ball in your court. The rebate is active for a full year after it's been executed, so you would have a year to complete the project. But the time that you can start that project would be at your discretion.
The next question comes from Sandra. Does a written proposal need to be submitted through GMS, or is it just quotes with model numbers?
Sandra, again, I definitely emphasize going back to the checklist. The checklist does identify documentation that would be considered required for an application. When it comes to a proposal, at a minimum, that sounds like information that would be entered into the project details tab of the application. Again, we would want to see a robust description of the project, but it's also something that if you have the project information, the scope of the project, kind of in a document form, that's something that could be attached and reviewed alongside the other material. But at a minimum, we would need to see that type of information in the project details tab of the application.
The next few questions come from Aaron. The first question Aaron has is, in an example that you showed, do they enter charging capacity per port or for total number of ports?
When you're entering the information, it would be per port. I'd entered information for a dual port charger. There is a difference for some chargers between the kilowatts provided when a single port is being used versus both ports of a dual port charger. We would, the best way to say is we would want to have entered the minimum amount of kilowatts offered by that model of charger. Specifically, the RFP says that chargers need to provide 6.6 kilowatts at any time. So that number that's entered should be greater than 6.6 and should consider, in the event of a dual port charger, what each port can offer an EV, even if both charging ports are being used at the same time.
Aaron's next question, can you explain this phrase more? The stations must be networked via communications protocol with smart charging controls. And that comes from the RFP.
Sure. The level 2 chargers in general come as networked or not networked. Networked means it can connect to the internet, and as RFP states, it would be through Wi-Fi or through a direct Ethernet connection, where non-networked would not have internet access. And some manufacturers of these level 2 chargers offer both varieties. So for this program specifically, we would need the variety of charger that would be able to connect to the internet, be able to have a web portal, something that you can access the metadata for your charger. But in general, a vendor would be able to ensure that this is happening, but we would want to, the program requires the ability for a charger to connect to the internet, and that's kind of the base minimum requirement for it to be considered smart or wired charger.
The next question, what counts as proof that all employees are permitted to use the EV charging station?
Part of the required documentation for this program is the workplace form. I believe on that form, something you will attest to is the fact that these chargers are not to be installed in spaces that are only for certain people. As far as I know, we've updated the form to reflect that information. If it hasn't been updated, we will certainly include that in there. But again, that workplace application form kind of attests to a few specific aspects of the workplace program, and that would be considered proof completed and submitted workplace form attached to the application.
Another question from Aaron. What if our authorized representatives have changed several times over the past year because of turnover? How do I confirm who those people are? Is it listed in GMS somewhere?
So the authorized representative is that field entered into the application in the event that, like you said, there's turnover, someone decides to no longer be in that role. What you would need to do is identify new staff from that organization as the new authorized representative and let myself and DAQ know as soon as you know, so that we can go through the steps of getting them access. They would need themselves to complete the access steps, the request application form, and then we would also have the SAP team remove the old authorized representative to make sure that they don't have access anymore. But that who is selected as the authorized representative and any kind of changes that happen with that personnel, that comes down to the organization. So they make the initial decision, and then they would need to provide DAQ with the update if anything changes.
Okay. Up next, we have a question statement from Melissa. She noticed that in the RFP, under the How to Apply section, it appeared the link was not working. And I will tell you, since Melissa submitted this question, I believe the link in the RFP has been corrected. It is page 9 of the RFP, but you can also find that information on the program web page. Find a link to the spreadsheet you're looking for. So the issue has been corrected in the RFP, I believe, and also the information can be found on the web page for the program itself. Next, we have a question from Sandra. Do I need to do an RFP or get more than one quote?
The RFP is a document that was written and put out by DAQ. So you, as an individual, don't need to do any RFP. But in terms of multiple quotes, if that is an internal policy for your organization, then I would encourage you to follow that internal policy. But as a requirement for receiving a rebate, it is not a requirement. You can submit and attach a quote from one vendor, and that would be sufficient.
Our next question comes from Rebecca. We have a deposit down and order in for an electric vehicle for our fleet. Are we eligible to apply for this funding, or do we need to currently own and have in our possession at least one EV?
The definition of fleet in the RFP is at least one vehicle. It's kind of the most broad definition one could offer, but in terms of if you are applying with the specifics of designating these charges for your fleet, you must, at the time of application, have one EV for that organizational fleet.
Stephen, I think we had the caveat that they had the intent to buy a electric vehicle for their fleet as well.
So so even if they don't, so the caveat would be,
If they're intending to have a commitment to purchase an electric vehicle, they would be eligible.
okay, so
But
if
they will
that,
have to provide documentation that they committed to purchase an electric vehicle.
yes, thank you, Brian. Yeah, if you do not have an EV in your organization's fleet, but this is the beginning of the interest for obtaining those types of vehicles, then yes, we would need that additional documentation included in the application.
Our next question comes from Minor. Can more than one employee of an organization establish an NCID for this program?
If more than one employee is intending to have access to the GMS, then the answer is yes. Again, each individual that wants grant management system access in order to edit an application, to submit an application, or just to to look. There were some managers that wanted access but didn't want to do more than kind of look at what was there, so that they're involved in the process. Each one of those individuals would need their own NCID. Hypothetically, if there was only one person representing an organization that needed or wanted GMS access, then that one individual would be the only person needing an NCID.
Up to 3 people per organization.
Correct. Thank you, Brian.
Now we have Kayla, who has asked a few questions. The first question is, do the 5 employees requirement have to be from the company that owned the building? For example, if my company owns the building and leases it to different companies, the chargers would be meant for employees of that building. Is that okay?
So that 5 employee requirement is applying to the organization that's applying for the rebate. So in the event that an organization leases a building, they would need the site owner to provide the approval for the project. But the site owner and whatever company or organization that they represent would not necessarily need the 5+ employees. The 5+ employees would be on the organization that is going to be applying for chargers, going to be installing the chargers, and going to be owning the chargers. That company, that organization needs the 5+ employees.
Stephen, Robin, a little confused with that answer. So because I'm capturing your answer, can you dumb it down for me, please?
What specifically do you want me to elaborate, Robin?
So I think I heard you say that the people who own the building, the people who want the chargers have to get permission from the people who own the building to install the chargers. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, if the organization applying is not the site owner, then they would need approval from the site owner to carry out the project.
Okay, but what I'm understanding from this question that this woman asked is they own the building, but they lease it to a bunch of different people. And she's wondering if those other people can be included in the employees who would use those chargers because they already own the building.
Well, the employees that we're considering to meet that requirement would be employees of the organization that's applying.
Okay.
But I think in this case, if the site owner owns the building with several smaller entities that are working at least the site, and they can prove that overall there's at least 5 people that are employees at that site, it'd be eligible.
Okay.
And
Thanks,
that,
Brian.
and that would be in the event that the site owner was applying for the chargers.
Okay. Kayla's next question. Following up on a question asked before, we have a parking garage for employees of the building we own. This parking garage has a gate that employees have access to. The chargers are meant for employees, but this lot is able to be accessed by the public for a fee. Would this be eligible?
As far as I interpret the RFP, thinking up the top of my head, it would be yes. I would probably want to see some additional information. But if the overall concept is if if non-employees could potentially use the chargers, then would that be a problem? And the way I see it, if employee charging is offered in a parking lot and maybe there's nothing inherently keeping the public away from those chargers, then I don't, again, if there's signage and things that indicate this is for employees, then that would be meeting the spirit and or requirements for this program. But again, when someone applies, it should be clearly identified that the chargers are specifically for employees of that organization or for fleet vehicles of that organization.
Kayla's last question, do we need to offer free charging for a rebate project?
The answer to that is no. The organization's choice to charge a fee for using the charging station is completely up to the organization, whether they do it or not, and if they do, what the price would be is completely out of the hands of DEQ. We have no power or control over that. The only thing I would add to that statement, though, is the RFP has a section about payment requirements. So if the plan is to charge a fee for charging, the chargers must accept or must be credit card industry compliant. So while there are apps and other ways to pay for the charging, the chargers that are to be considered eligible for a project like this must accept credit cards.
Okay, our next question comes from Amy. Do you have a sense of how competitive this round of funding will be and how time-sensitive submitting an application would be?
Yeah, hi, Amy. Unfortunately, I don't have a great idea of that just yet. The RFP was released a couple weeks ago, and it's going to take time for the information to disseminate. In phase one, there were quite a few a pretty good amount of workplace projects, and kind of even projects that were considered public but also used by workplace employees. We kind of restructured the requirements for phase two, but I the best I can do is compare it to other phase two programs and say I don't think you need to stress about applying at 1201 come July 25th in order to get funding, but I would also not recommend you wait. I would say if you're in a position to apply, that you apply as soon as possible and as soon as you're comfortable going through that process.
Thank you, Stephen. As of right now, we don't have any additional questions in the Q&A box.
Okay, well, it's possible people are thinking of follow-up questions to answers that were given or to new questions. I'll just backtrack this one slide and show the contact information. Again, if this does happen to be the end of our Q&A time, and then you think of a question later today or later this week, you're always welcome to send me an email or give me a call. We'll talk about your idea for the project, or we'll talk about the program requirements. More than happy to do that. And yeah, we'll give people just another minute to see if they're getting ready to ask a question.
And we still have no additional questions at this time.
Okay. Well, I think with that being said, I think we can conclude today's webinar. I really appreciate everyone's attendance today. I hope you found this webinar worthwhile and having plenty of information. I also want to thank our Volkswagen DAQ staff for helping on the presentation and organizing the webinar and the questions today. Again, thanks everyone for their time. I look forward to working with you soon, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Stephen.